So guys, you know, I recently got this cold steel large Espada, and it's a great knife, but a lot of times the Triad locks on these can be a little bit rough. So what we're going to look at is, can I fix the smoothness of this knife? So let's turn around, go over to the table, take this thing apart, and look inside. All right, guys. Well, we're going to do something we haven't done in a while. I'm going to take this large Espada apart because I want to do a little bit more cleanup on this. We're going to talk about some of the things we can do for that. But I'm going to show you how to take apart one of these cold steel Triad locks. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't like taking these apart. It's not that they're super difficult. They can be a little finicky, but it's typically because the springs in it are so strong and they can be a pain. So what we're going to need is a couple bit drivers. We need some bits. I'm using these ones. These are Torx security bits. I like having these around because I also work on electronics from time to time, and they're always a good one to have. You're going to want some lubricants. You're going to need some bit drivers. I have a couple of bit drivers. They're just your simple little, you know, I think they're 1/4-inch drive bits. They fit these nut drivers, things like that. You can, you know, really simple. We're going to need some lubricant, and we're going to want some Loctite. But when we get ready to do the couple little polishing steps we're talking about, I'll get that stuff out and show you for that. But first thing we're going to do is we're just simply going to disassemble this. And this is a T6 and T10, if I remember correctly. I haven't had one of these apart. I know that looks like a yeah, it's T6. And we have the Loctite because we are going to want to re-Loctite all of this. So I also recommend, if you're working on something like this, you either have a magnetic bowl like this, or off to the side of the mat where you guys can't see it, these little pockets, you can use these pockets, but there's also spots with magnets along the side. Here, let me zoom out and show you what I'm talking about. There we go. These little spots here are all magnetic. Pay no attention to the ungodly mess that's on the workbench. We're going to resolve that later. But yeah, it's nice to have some place where you can store your screws. I like having multiple spots for it instead of just using the bowl, because sometimes on these knives, as you take them apart, you'll find that the screws are of different length. I don't think that's the case on this, but we're going to use that little pocket right there for that one. I think these are all the same. And as Nick Shabazz pointed out years ago in a video, I remember him talking about it, and I just remembered it while we were doing this. You don't have to take all of the screws out. You don't have to do both sides because these are offset. So you can simply take one side apart for this disassembly on this. So yeah, these screws are all the same length. They are Loctited, but they're not heavily Loctited. The Loctite, this one doesn't even have any. The Loctite that they use from the factory a lot of times from these companies is not my preferred amount of Loctite. I like it to be a little bit stiff. Now, I have tightened the pivot down on this one a couple times and put my own Loctite on there. So there's some Loctite stick on there. So you can see I put a good bit more Loctite on this than what came from the factory. As a matter of fact, that is thread lock Loctite stick. I like the stick. I find it to be a little bit better than the liquid. So let's go ahead and open this up. This one has never been apart, so it may be a little finicky. Pry bars are always a nice thing to have around, just simply to lift up gently on these. So you're going to see in here is phosphor bronze washers, your lock bar, and all of that. So we're going to go ahead, and then you take this piece off. This is just a liner that's over top, and you can see the actual workings of a Triad lock. So if you've ever wanted to see how one of these basic back locks work, that's how they work. It's a little slot, little key. This over time will continue to drop in further and just get stronger over time. But we're simply going to remove the tension off of that, and then we can lift this blade out. And there you go. So there's your washers on this. You can see I've been carrying this a lot. It's dirty, but what we're really going to address is that's rough on the back. And I think if we just polish this a little bit more, we're going to have a better all-around smoothness on this knife. Now, if you do find that your Triad lock is a little bit too stiff, you can actually remove a little bit of the tension off this lock bar. I don't recommend it. It's going to do it on its own over time. So we're just going to pull that pin out, which allows us to pull the actual lock bar out, and then our spring. So that's simply the spring that's in it, and there's your pins and everything. This is the pin in a Triad lock that accepts that additional force. That's what makes the Triad lock special, is just the addition of that pin and how it interfaces with the actual parts of the knife. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get this all cleaned up. I gotta grab a rag and some stuff, and I'm gonna move some of the stuff out of the way. So I'll bring you back in just a second when I get the stuff I need to do the actual cleanup. All right, it's really simple. You just need a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a rag, and I have some of these scratch brushes, but they come in handy because it has this nylon one in here, and they simply screw out. They don't take up as much space as some others. It's a nice and soft one, so you can kind of get down into spots that you can't get into. It also comes with a fiberglass one, a brass one, and a steel one if you want to use those on other stuff. I have used these for cleaning up rust on things. They are just nice because you can do small little areas and clean up things. The fiberglass one is actually nice because you can clean up and slightly polish things with the fiberglass one. So let's go ahead and start cleaning this up. These do run on phosphor bronze washers with a nylon underpiece. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to keep these together as we remove them so that we don't lose the little nylon thing that is on there. So those don't need a lot done with them. I don't like the lubricant. Wrong way. I don't like the lubricant that's on these when they come. It's not my preferred lubricant, and a lot of times that can have an effect on the smoothness. But what's really causing, you're going to hear the ice machine in a second. What's really causing the roughness and coarseness of this is that area right there. And you can see how it's starting to polish up, but I kind of want to clean that up a little bit more than it is. I want to get this all cleaned out because this has been spending a lot of time in pocket. And I also want to clean the lock bar up real good and get anything that's lubricant-wise that is not necessarily the lubrication I want. Because sometimes grease and oil don't mix well together. Sometimes they use synthetic grease versus an actual grease or an oil that can have an effect. We may do a quick polish on some of these faces as well, because this does ride on the blade. You can see where it's riding on the blade. I'll show you how we're going to do that. And then simply we're going to clean up just the guts of this, because I have been fairly impressed with this knife. I like carrying it, and so it does spend a lot of time in my pocket. These pins, all of these pins are removable, and you can clean the pin themselves and put them back in after they're clean. Already pretty much did this one, but we'll clean around it, and then we'll get this one back here. Well, actually, that one doesn't feel like it wants to come out. Sometimes they don't want to, and you can actually just take the spring out and clean it as well. We'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll get back into the assembly of the knife. Now you want to make sure that you put your spring in the way it's supposed to go. And now that I've done that, I have to take a look inside this one. And you can see I have done it upside down. It's always nice to have a reference so you can see how that bend is supposed to be up. I thought so, but I dropped it. Always pay attention to how the knife comes apart so that you make sure you can put it back together. So yeah, we're just going to clean up all these parts, and then I am going to clean these phosphor bronze washers and re-lubricate them, but I want to make sure that I do it gently because you don't want to fold those little thin nylon washers that are with it. So clean that, and we'll just clean this with our fingers so we don't fold it at all, because you don't want that to happen, because that is a surface that it's going to, you want to ride together. And that's the surface that's going to touch the blade. The other one touches the G10 itself, so that you want to just make sure that you get that put back together properly. We'll just clean these off with our fingers here. And you can see this one has two. So I would imagine that there's two on the other one as well, if I were to go look closely. It could be that one of them needed a shim and the other one didn't. But I would imagine, nope, There's definitely 2 on this one, but I don't see that being something that's going to affect too badly, even if you get it from side to side. Even if it is off slightly from side to side, it's not that big a deal. Cold steels are famous for being a little bit off from side to side. If you want to talk about the robustness of cold steel knives, this back liner here, that's aluminum. And they have reinforced the area for the pocket clip, so you're not screwing it directly into G10. We're going to clean this area out here. Since we've got it apart, may as well. So now what we're going to do is we've got everything apart. We're going to look at how we're going to clean this up. And guys, I apologize. I don't know what's going on. I'm fighting with shadows today that I don't typically have in the studio. So I don't know if it's the angle I'm filming from or what. But yeah, we're going to try and polish this up a little bit. So let me get the stuff we need for that and bring it back. And it is very sharp. That is a very, very sharp knife. I just barely touched that. That should tell you, cold steels, GSM, post GSM, they're not all dull from the factory. I'm telling you right now, that one is not. So let me get the stuff we need to polish that. Okay, so when we're polishing the spine of this knife, and since these washers have these little nylon ones with them, you don't have to worry about polishing those washers. They already have got a level of polish on them just because of how they're being made with the nylon on them. So what you really want to look at on these are polishing these surfaces, these little marriage points. I thought I got that to stop bleeding. So you can polish this up a little bit, and you can polish up the actual surface that it rides on here. Now, you don't want to remove too much, but you can get away with polishing just a little bit, you know what I mean? So there's a couple things that you need, and I forgot to grab one thing. Hang on just a second. All right, I changed our angle a little bit here, and I went and got a Band-Aid because YouTube has this thing about blood on camera. So it's not a bad cut. I just don't want blood on camera. So when we're polishing this, we got to be careful. We do want to clean up these things. Now, it's not like a lock bar on a, what do you want to call it? Like a frame lock. Because on a frame lock, you have to worry about the interface. Let me grab one and show you what I'm talking about. So on a frame lock, you have to worry about how the blade interfaces with the lock bar, and it can be a little spot, and just taking off any material, it can affect the lockup. On something like a Triad lock, where this whole thing drops down into that slot, you don't have to worry about it, and the lock surface is not what we're going to be changing. We're going to polish this up a little bit. This doesn't really matter. That's all we're going to do is this surface, and then the surface it rides on back here. Now, you can do it a couple ways. This is chromium oxide on a leather strop. I'm probably going to use a little bit of this diamond paste. It's 9 micron. It's diamond paste. It's a polishing paste. Put that on a rag and use it. But my first step is going to be this ultra-fine ceramic rod from Spyderco. These are great for this because they are super, super fine. It's like a jeweler's rod in gunsmithing, where you're just going to clean that surface up to a high polish with the surface of this rod, almost like you're using a file. This is the same thing you would do with trigger bars on if you were gunsmithing. So we're going to do that. We're just going to clean up any little inconsistency. You see there's some high spots on here. You see how there's spots that are shining before the rest of it. We're just going to try and even everything out on this with this super, super fine ceramic rod. And then we're going to go back behind. And we may, this little area here is starting to polish up. We'll take the little corner of it. We'll clean up this little spot right here, because this is basically the detent on it. But the detent on this is not what's posing problems. It's the coarseness of the stone wash that's on this spine where the actual lock drags. So you just want to, I'm not applying any pressure, just like if I was sharpening. I'm just cleaning up anything that is rough and inconsistent and making it a little bit smoother. And I'm going to do the same thing with the surface of this lock right here with this same tool, right? So I'm going to fast forward this. I'll put you guys on time lapse so you can see, and then we'll get the knife put back together. Okay, I've done about all I want to do on that stone. And I mean, this is a super, super smooth stone. We didn't remove very much material. It's hardened steel. So what I'm going to do now is just clean up and polish that a little bit more. The only thing I've done is now it's really smooth. You can see there's little scratch marks, but those were high spots that were dragging. And I didn't completely flatten this. I only hit the spots that are touching the blade. Over time, it's going to polish itself out. But I want to get a step forward on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some of this 9 micron diamond paste on this rag. And this is a polishing compound. I do use it for stropping compound from time to time on some of my strops. But I'm simply going to just spend some time polishing this with this rag and getting this surface cleaned up and smoothed. And you're going to see it's not removing enough material. Now, I was really careful not to hit that point there because you don't want to affect that. You don't want to do anything detrimental to the lockup on this. I'm simply just trying to do some polishing. Now, if I had a Dremel, I could put it on low speed and do this. I could take this out and put the buffing wheel on my grinder, but I think for what I need, I'm just basically cleaning this up ever so slightly with a little bit of diamond paste. So I'm going to put you guys back on time lapse. You can see I'm already removing this material. I'll put you guys back on time lapse. We'll come back. This is not a quick and easy process. It's fairly quick or fairly lengthy. It's not difficult. It's just time consuming. And you may see me using one of my leather strops loaded with diamond spray on a suede strop, just to get a better final polish on this. So yeah, let's go ahead and get you guys back in time lapse and I'll do the rest of this time lapse for you. Okay, so we've polished everything up, and it might not look like it's that much different, but let's go ahead and clean this up first. So it might not look that much different, but those little micro spots that were on that were raised, we've polished those off. So we're going to clean this up, and you can see it's significantly more polished than it was. The big part was those areas that you saw that were almost looked like scratches that were going different angles. Those were little high spots and little inconsistencies, and we basically polished those out. That's going to give us a jump on the break-in process for this knife. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to clean everything up. Hello? Sorry about that. I had to confirm my appointment for tomorrow for physical therapy. For my shoulder. I'm trying to avoid surgery. I did polish this up a little bit. You can see the little points where it touches are a little bit smoother. Those low areas, I'm not worried about. They're not making contact with the knife over time. They will polish themselves out. Now, the getting these back together is always the fun part because there's a little trick to it. I'm going to show you. So your pivot on these are keyed, which is cool. I'm glad that the pivot is keyed. So you're going to put your pivot in. You're going to take out the actual pin from the Triad lock so that you can put this on top of the spring. But you got to make sure your spring's all the way in. Make sure your spring's pushed all the way to the back. So, so you're going to put that on top of the spring like that. And that's going to allow you to push that down so that you can get, as soon as I figure out where I set it down, the other pin. So your other pin's going to have to go in, and that's kind of what makes this work. So you're going to have to push this down. You're going to have to put this pin in. And that's going to allow you to stop that from falling all the way out, right? Then you can put your pivot in, and then you're about ready to start As soon as I find the keyed, it's keyed, it's just not keyed real well. So at any rate, put your pivot in. This side was the side that had the 2 washers. So we're going to put the washer on right there. And I'm going to put a drop of KPL. I like KPL. I do not like grease. You really don't need grease on something that's also got nylon in there. So you can put your grease in. And you put these on. And then you're going to put another drop of grease on here. And that's going to give you some good lubrication between that and the blade. Now, the next step is you've got to get the blade in. So you've got to play with this so that you can drop the lock bar in, and then you just drop it in like that. Then nylon washer, bronze, and I'm sorry. Well, the nice thing about KPL, it's pretty thin. You can just put a drop and it should, through capillary action, as you can see there, work its way in, and I don't need any more lubricant on that. And I'm going to take this washer, I'm going to put it on top of that, right? I'm going to wipe off any little bit of excess because that's a little bit more than we need. And we're simply going to start to reassemble a knife. Really easy. This is the jimping that goes on that top side. These pins slide into their adjoining holes, and then you just simply put your screws back in, tighten it down, and then you can play back and forth with getting your action the way you want and getting your pivot tight and all that. We'll do that in a second. I did not Loctite these because I want to see if it's as smooth as I want it to be. So we're just going to go with the factory Loctite that was on them for now. And for these body screws like this that aren't accepting a lot of force, unlike the pivot, you really don't need a lot of Loctite on them. They're pretty much going to stay in place, especially considering they're not screwed into plastic. They're not screwed into G10. They are screwed into an aluminum plate. Get that in there. And then I didn't tighten those down like super, super tight. We're going to put our pivot in. Our pivot screw. And we're going to tighten it down. And we're going to take a look at where we're at on the action. And I definitely tightened that pivot down too tight, I think. Or actually, good chance is that because I forgot to do this. On these, a little bit of lubricant on the spine here is going to make everyone's life a little bit easier. I like the KPL heavy on these lockbacks, a little drop there where that, so you've got some good solid. Wow, I definitely got that pivot too tight. There we go. Oh yes, that is way smoother than it was. It's still centered. That is way, way smoother. It's going to take a little bit for all the lubricant to work its way throughout the parts. I had the pivot too tight on that. So on these, you may get a little bit of oil that leaks its way out just because of the way that they're constructed. You'll get a little bit of the oil that works its way through because I put a good bit of oil on that because it does have the nylons. But yeah, that is way, way smoother than it was. And like I said, over time, it's going to continue to smooth up as those parts wear together. There's no blade play in that. And it is definitely smooth. Oh yeah, it is way smoother than it was. This thing was really, really stiff from the factory. Now we have an XL version of this coming, and I'm not sure how we're going to film that. So guys, there you go. Let's turn this around, do some final thoughts, and send you out about your day. Forgot to mention, when you get it where you want and everything's fine, and if you're done messing with it, don't forget to Loctite your pivot, especially on something like this with a big, heavy blade. Now let's turn it around and do some final thoughts. There you go, guys. Yeah, there's some steps you can do, or you could simply just carry this knife a lot and allow it to do it on its own. This is just a way that you can kind of get a jump start on that smoothness that you see from one that's really worn in. Triad locks only get better over time. They're not like a lot of locks where you wind up with more issues the longer you have them. They actually get better, they get stronger, they get smoother over time. Great, great knife. Wait till we get the XL, because it's a-coming. I did something stupid on New Year's Eve because well, rum. At any rate, guys, that's it on this one. You guys know what to do. Hit the like, share, subscribe buttons on this thing. That's free. If you guys want to support the channel, there's a bunch of affiliate links down below that support the channel directly. They don't cost you anything extra at checkout. They simply provide me a portion of what you've got at checkout. Please don't use honey. Honey screws us content creators. I actually did enter into that class action lawsuit. Coffee Brand Coffee Tempered Trail down below have a discount built into their links. Nathan should be sending me some hand-stitched leather wallets from Tempered Trail for us to look at in a future video. Another way that you can save money, coupon code crazysharp, KATSU Knives, Rosecraft Blades, Fair & Forge Knife Works saves you 10% at checkout just by using coupon code crazysharp, all one word. You can also join my membership, get early access to video, exclusive content. I just filmed a rant video for the paying members. And there is a public Discord down below. It says join the community, hang out there. If you got questions, you got knives, you want to get a hold of me and see if you want to send them in, hit me up in the DM section of that. Guys, that's it on this one. I love y'all. Keep it clean in the comments section. If it's your birthday, happy birthday, and I will see you in the next video.